On the agenda tonight, we're going to be taking a look at Marcelito Pomoy, and he's going to be performing the prayer. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So, with this particular request, all that was written on it, or with the message, was, how is this possible? So we're going to be taking a look at this particular performance and then attempting to explain how this is indeed possible. So let's get Marcelito up on screen and see how he gets on.
Wish 1075.
I pray you'll be alright and watch us where we go and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe.
La luce che tu dai
I pray you will find your light
nel cuore resterà,
and hold within our heart.
a ricordarci che
The stars go out each night.
eterna stella sei nella mia preghiera.
Let this be our prayer
Quanta fede c'è
when shadows fill our day.
lead us to a
Rise, guide us with your grace.
give us faith so we'll be saved.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, there's a link in the description below if you guys want to watch this original video without me interrupting it. But you would have noticed that we have both the parts of Celine Dion and Andrea Bocelli being sung by one person. And the impressive thing to me is certainly his head voice and the way that he's just got this ability to keep it really clean. And then when his chest voice comes in, he's got so much body in there. And just referencing the question, how is this possible? It's a great demonstration of vocal registers and how when you ascend in range, when I've spoken in other videos about handing it off to head voice, you get rid of all the weight of chest voice, and that's exactly what's happening here. Now, saying it and doing it are two entirely different things. In order to have the ability to access head voice with this kind of clarity and ease, I love the way that he's so relaxed, where he's just, doing it as if it's nothing. And this is another thing to bring up, that his vocal technique is so good. I think he's just one of those people that has had the ability to do this, and he hasn't necessarily learned to sing from scratch and then try and figure out how to get up into his head voice with this kind of clarity. He's probably just always been able to access it and just had that perfect vocal cord configuration that is like the holy grail to balance the amount of air and compression, but it is such a slight compression that obviously there's no tension in the throat or anything going on. You can hear how he's almost just balancing on that tightrope of air. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. As soon as you go over, you lose that connection, and you'll get tension and all these kinds of things coming in. It is so difficult to do this, but some singers just have this ability, and it might have been something that has been possible since a very young age. And I do mention about some singers, when they start singing very young, they already have perfect technique, because having bad technique is something that unfortunately you just learn as you get older. Especially if you haven't learned to sing, you start using your voice in a way that it wasn't really intended to be used in the first place, because especially as guys, we start to just use our chest voice all the time when we're talking, and I'm talking in chest voice now. So to get really high notes, you start thinking, well, hang on, since I went through puberty, I haven't accessed any of those really high notes because I've just been talking in my chest voice the whole time. So when you start talking in chest voice for 20 years, and then you go, okay, I'm going to learn to sing, and then you think, well, how am I going to hit those notes all the way up there? Because you try and take your chest voice up that high, and that's where it's impossible to do that. You'll hit a ceiling with your chest voice, and you have to try and get the other vocal registers engaged. So just before we jump into the vocal, I have isolated it and run it through the pitch monitoring software, so you can see that on the right hand side of the screen. What I love about this performance is that it hasn't been post-produced. And this is something that happens all the time on YouTube and all over the place now on the internet. Unfortunately, a performance that is already impressive is then post-produced and has pitch correction added to it to try and make it seem even more impressive than it was originally. So this is the kind of performance that it is totally live, is unedited, and this is so rare to see nowadays. And as we let it play through,
I pray you'll be alright.
you can hear how light this sound is vocally, and how accurate he is pitch-wise, just bang on the notes. But you will see where he's slightly flat and slightly sharp, but it doesn't matter. I mean, he's got that vibrato in there as well that's really controlled, but it doesn't matter because great singers don't always sing on lines. So yeah, it's great that this hasn't been edited.
In watches where we go.
I mean, there's a tiny hint of a flip there from a lighter sound into the head voice. Let's have a listen again.
In watches where we go.
I mean, that little flip there, I mean, it's so subtle. This is another thing about having vocal breaks and going from a low note to a higher note, especially if you're going into head voice. You get, to begin with, or you can use this stylistically if you want to, such as yodeling. You hear a little flip in the voice where it goes up into head voice, and you can learn to control that. But in this case, we've got that eradication of that flip. It's really smooth the way that he ascends up into his head voice from these lower notes. And this is the point, that these lower notes, when he does get up into his head voice, they would normally be in his chest voice. So he's using a really light head voice sound to keep it consistent, so it sounds like a female voice. So to give an example of that, if I go like that, go that is keeping the note light, so keeping it in head voice. If I went that is now a more of a guy's voice. That's in chest voice. So what you do is you thin out that sound, keep it in head voice, and it starts to, take on more female qualities, because female singers don't have the lower range of guys, and very much their talking voices are a head voice sound. But anyway, we'll get back into this.
And help us to be wise in times when we don't know.
And that's the kind of thing here, that this G4 would be so pitch corrected if this was post-produced. You just grab that and pull it up to the line, but again, it's not a true reflection of the voice. And this is why a lot of people that are learning to sing might get downhearted and a little bit annoyed at their own voices not being spot on lines all the time. Don't worry about it. Anything that is spot on the lines to 440 hertz tuning, equal temperament, has been edited. Great singers don't sing like that, so don't worry about it.
Let this be our
And I know that I'm stopping this the whole time, just second by second. But the impressive thing here is, I mean, not just hitting the notes in a really clean head voice, but keeping his head voice consistent as he goes down into the range where his chest voice sits naturally. And we know that his chest voice is going to be down there because of what he sings later on.
When we lose our way, lead us to a place, guide us with your grace.
And there, that guide us with your, that part, and then he goes up to C5, but that part you can hear is quite nasal, so it's right at the bottom of his head voice and his head register. To access those notes so low down, this is why I said it's impressive, keeping that that thin sound to it, where you know, it's definitely chest voice notes.
To a place where we'll be safe.
He actually went down to a D4 there with his head voice.
La luce che tu dai.
Now, something that I want to point out about this transition now to chest voice, this is where all the body is. We're singing, no. So we're a lot lower now, and you know, obviously the range in this is just going to be crazy because we're down to an F4 here. But the important thing to look out for is, I'm just going to take this back because we want to be looking at, if you can see my arrow on screen, here's the larynx, the way that he drops the larynx in order to get the thicker sound. So if I go like that, you can definitely see the movement from my talking voice to now putting more body in the sound. And if you want to try and get that sound, or you can't lower your larynx, you just want to make a dull kind of duh sound, and you'll be able to see your Adam's apple. If you're looking in a mirror, you'll be able to see it drop down, but you'll hear the sound that you make just has more body to it. But I'm allowing my larynx to now go up to get it in a kind of a head voice place, but it's a bit of a nasty sound, kind of going but it's just good for those purposes of seeing. You can see that dramatic change that you have, and that's changing tone. It's changing the distance that you've got between your larynx and your vocal cords. Generally, the higher your larynx goes, the more nasty it's going to sound. And when you start pulling chest voice and belting, that can be something that happens as well. Your larynx goes up, you start using lots of air, and that's how you can fatigue your voice pretty quickly. So you're going to be seeing this kind of thing throughout the whole performance, going from the lower octave to then an octave higher to represent the female vocal. But you can see here we're in around the F3, so the F3 is down here on our piano in the middle of that baritone range, but then jumping up an octave, it means that we're now getting to the F4. But the important thing to point out is that this isn't chest voice. He's going into this really clean head voice. So when he's hitting this F4, it's that female version of that particular note. He's not taking his chest voice up this high. Not yet anyway, but let's get back into it.
I pray we'll find your light
Nel cuore resterà
in hold within our heart.
a ricordarci.
Again, great example there. This was in his head voice, really light, and then he accesses his chest voice a semitone above. So let's take that back and have a listen to it in slow motion. And there, so he's going, nah. He's got that light sound, and then and then gets into that lowered larynx, that more male voice, male sounding voice. Tone wise, his voice naturally has that kind of, I don't know, expression to it, that if you're not looking at the singer, you could imagine that it's a female voice. So it's to do with tone as well as just great technique of bringing his head voice down into where his chest voice is. So when I'm talking about bringing that head voice down, you know, these notes down here, like the A3, for example, when we're looking at the piano, our A3 is down here. So he's bringing that head voice down into his baritone range, but then using chest voice to sing the baritone range as well. And that's the difference between those two, going, head voice, chest voice, you know, a lot more body, a lot more, you know, volume, and you can really kind of lean into that. So as we, I mean, just quickly explaining it, as we then go up in pitch, what will tend to happen is going, and that will happen getting lighter into head voice, but you can go, and then try and take your chest voice higher, but then you'll hit a ceiling. Now, you can mix your chest voice with your head voice, which is called mixed voice, and that has elements of both of those registers in there, but here we're just going straight into head voice. So we kind of get this chest voice, mixed voice, head voice, and then falsetto is a different register that you can't go and go up into your falsetto, because the vocal cords break off, and that's why it sounds airy whenever you're listening to somebody singing in falsetto. And then you have got a reinforced falsetto, which is a way to put kind of more compression in the sound to get it to sound more like head voice. It's complicated when you're listening to great singers in order to figure out exactly what they're doing, but generally the air in the sound is what will be able to tell you whether it's falsetto or not. And especially if they're holding a note and ascending or doing a run and they go up really high, they're not getting into falsetto, because you can't do that. That's going to be head voice. Even though I know that a lot of people for some reason think that any high note is called falsetto, but it's not. Falsetto is a totally different vocal register. So that is it. From the bottom, chest voice, into mixed voice, into head voice, then into falsetto, which is kind of totally different. But anyway, what we've got here is we're missing out the mixed voice. We're going straight from chest voice to head voice. So that's why it sounds like two totally different voices, because they're totally different registers. But like I said, he's just got this female sound to his head voice. It is so clean, it is so light, that's what makes it sound different. If you heard another guy singing this and doing this, because there are plenty of vocalists that would be able to do this, getting into either mixed voice or head voice, but their head voice would still have male characteristics about it. It would still not sound like a true female voice. But this is the difference, that this does sound like a female voice. And let me just say that his voice, his chest voice, has a great sound to it as well. I mean, it's not like my voice, because I haven't trained in order to get that that kind of, you know, big sound to it. I can kind of imitate it, but I haven't trained my voice to do that. I'm not a classically trained singer. You can see and hear this dramatic difference between his vocal registers, which is why it works so well. Now we're taking chest voice up to A4. Now we are getting up towards the top end of the male tenor range. And of course, talking about Andrea Bocelli, you know, that's where it is. These are the money notes up here, hitting them in chest voice and not head voice. So he's got the ability to take his chest voice up to this height where he was using his head voice before. So this is the impressive thing. Just having great vocal technique in order just to do this, but getting such a full sound on this A4, which is now truly a tenor sound. He's hitting this in chest voice, which is what the tenors do. They have the ability to hit high notes with that full-bodied sound. And going up a semitone, A sharp 4 there.
We ask that life be kind. stars from above.
Would you not trovi amore
We hope it's so we'll find
intorno dentro sé?
another soul to love.
I mean, it's great that he's only got one breath between these vocal phrases to then sing it in the female voice, get up into his head voice, and then totally detach, get back into his chest voice, sing that part, totally detached, and sometimes he throws in a little run before he gets into the chest voice. So that transition, I mean, it's so impressive. I mean, it sounds really cool.
Let this be our prayer.
And here, now we have this lightened chest voice sound, but with the male tone. He's leaving a little bit of chest, but he's not going na, 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 and kind of keeping it light like that. He's going ah, ah. So having that mix of the two rather than kind of doing it all in chest voice. So you've got the personality of the separate voices that he's putting into it.
Let this be our prayer,
Just like every child,
just like every child.
need to find a place. Guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be safe. Il a fait que I just saw it. Sento che ci salva.
Wish exclusive on Wish 1075.
And there we have it. And he had a good cough at the end there. The control on those last notes, and you know, we didn't go up to the pitch monitoring software said, I think a D6. We didn't go up that high. It'll be the D5. It might be seen as a novelty by some people, but the execution of it is so good that if you weren't looking at it, would you know that this is one person doing both of the voices? I don't think you would do, and that's where it becomes musically credible. So a bit of a different one to take a look at tonight, but a very interesting one. Thank you guys for requesting this video for tonight, and as always, keep the suggestions and requests coming in the comments section below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys at the next one. Rock!